Let me tell you a story. Not the kind of story that shouts, not the kind that pushes an agenda, just a quiet story. One that many Africans feel but rarely say out loud. It's a story about power, about justice, and about why the International Criminal Court, the ICC, still makes Africa uncomfortable. And somewhere inside this story, people have started mentioning the name of Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Not because she's been charged, not because she's guilty, but because Africa has seen this move before. So imagine this. You are an African leader. You lead a country shaped by colonial history, donor pressure, and global expectations. And then there's this court in Europe, the International Criminal Court, that says it exists for justice. But here's where the story becomes uncomfortable. Because almost every time we hear about the ICC, it's an African name. Sudan, Kenya, DRC, Uganda, Ivory Coast. And now, questions are quietly being asked about Tanzania. Again, let me be very clear. President Samia Suluhu Hassan has not been indicted by the ICC. No arrest warrant, no charges. But the discussion exists because how the ICC operates and because of the African past experiences. And that's the real story here. Let's slow it down. The ICC prosecutes individuals for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. But there is a condition. The court only steps in when a country is seen as unable or unwilling to prosecute its own cases. And Africa asks, who decides what unwilling means? And who decides when justice applies? That's where distrust begins. So what exactly are people pointing to when President Samia's name comes up? No court documents, no sealed indictments. It's about state actions, political pressure, and human rights allegations raised by international bodies. Things like NGO reports, activist testimonials, media investigation, UN special rapporteurs. This is the same kind of materials the ICC has relied on before. But here's the truth. Evidence being discussed does not mean guilt. Now let's imagine, purely hypothetically, that a case ever came up. What would her defense be? A strong one, actually. She would argue Tanzania has a functioning judiciary. National courts are capable. There's no armed conflicts in Tanzania at the moment. No genocidal intent. Political reforms are underway, and legally speaking, that matters because the ICC is not supposed to replace national judicial systems or justice systems. So would she be convicted, honestly? Very unlikely. That's not politics, that's law. But here's where the anger comes in, because while African leaders are questioned, investigated, and sometimes dragged to Hague, what about Tony Blair? What about George Bush? The Iraq war led to over 1 million deaths. No ICC trials, no arrest warrants, no dramatic court appearances, just silence. And Africans noticed that silence. So the real issue isn't President Samia. The real issue here is the international justice truly international? Or does it push the weak while protecting the powerful? Because justice that chooses sides stop being justice and start looking like control. This isn't about defending leaders blindly. And it's not about attacking international courts emotionally. It's about asking one honest question. If justice is global, why does it keep landing on African soil? Very important question. That's the story. If this made you think, if it made you uncomfortable, or if it made you ask questions, then the story did its job. Like, share, and subscribe, because some stories are too important to stay quietly.